What's good, YouTube? This is Boxingwave. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share the video if you like the content. Hit the thumbs up if you like the content. All right. I'm making this video to compare Terrence Crawford's situation with Jerron Boots Ennis to David Benavidez' situation to Canelo Alvarez, because I keep receiving comments from people, and I know why I'm getting the comments. Because Canelo is getting a lot of criticism. So people like to come and compare Crawford because for two reasons. I'm a fan of Crawford, and, they want to take the heat off Canelo. And, they like to bring up Floyd Mayweather. They want to bring up Gervonta Tate Davis to take the heat off Canelo. They want to just distract you and get the heat off Canelo. People want to see the Benavidez fight. And instead of talking about Canelo and Benavidez, they want to change directions and talk more about Crawford, Tank, Floyd, losing to Castillo in the first fight. They are doing this because they don't want you to talk about Canelo and his fight with Benavidez. So being that I keep getting those kind of comments, I'm going to make a video and break this down and show you with facts, not opinion, not emotions. These are all things that were said in different interviews from the fighters or the camps, and compared it to, because they're not the same. Now, I've gone on record in several videos now saying I do want Crawford to fight Jerron Boots Ennis. It's not like I don't want him to fight him, but what I do understand that the circumstances are totally different. The timing is different, and overall, it's just two totally different situations. Outside of undisputed being a thing for a short period of time for Crawford, there are really no similarities between the two situations, because Benavidez and Boots are not in the same situation, right? They're two totally different fighters with two totally different backgrounds, with two totally different resumes. So I'm going to break that down. I did write a little list, but it's probably a little all over the place because I just put it all together. But I want to talk about it and just give you the facts about these two scenarios, because they are very, very different. So for the ones that don't know, some of you don't know, and some of you are just trying to take the heat off Canelo that he's receiving right now for not fighting David Benavidez. And again, it's not all Canelo's fault that he didn't fight David Benavidez, because he signed with the PBC for a 3-fight deal, and apparently David Benavidez was not part of that deal. Whether or not that's true or not, that is what we're hearing. And this is why we're hearing all these other fights. This is why fights like Jamel Charlo was made. The Jamal Charlo fight was almost made. And all these other fights that don't involve David Benavidez. All right. So, look. Let's start off. Crawford's last fight was Errol Spence Jr. His last fight was Errol Spence Jr. He became undisputed at welterweight against Errol Spence Jr. All right. His very last fight. Errol, most viewed him as being a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter, undefeated. All right. Crawford just fought him. All right. Now, I know we're in the new year and we're waiting for Crawford to get back in the ring, but his last fight, his very last fight, was Errol Spence Jr. Okay. That fight was undisputed. All right. Now, Boots was the IBF mandatory, and Crawford got stripped of that title right away because the IBF was not going to allow that IBF strap to be involved in a rematch clause, which has nothing to do with the rules of the IBF. That's something that those two parties agreed to do when they made the fight. The fight was not going to be made without a two-way rematch clause, because it was a lot on the line. And of course, if the fight was going to be competitive, they probably would have ran it back, but they didn't. All right. So just let's start out with that. In order for the scenarios to be the same, Canelo Alvarez became undisputed at 168 4 fights ago. All right. So when he beat Caleb Plant, he became undisputed then. In order for the circumstances to be the same, Benavidez would have had to been in his mandatory right then. Canelo would have had to get stripped right then in order to for you guys to compare the two. They're two totally different scenarios. Canelo went on to fight Bivol, which wasn't a mandatory. He chose to go up to fight Bivol. Not mad at the fight, but it's not the same thing. He fought Bivol. He fought Triple G in a voluntary fight. And he fought John Ryder, who was supposed to be one of his mandatories for one of his titles. And then he went on to fight Jamel Charlo, who moved up 2 divisions to fight him. These are all fights, 4 fights that happened that did not involve David Benavidez, who was his mandatory, or I'm sorry, the interim WBC champion. Not his mandatory, but he was the interim WBC champion for the last 2 years, for the last 3 fights. All right. So the circumstances are very different than Jaron Ennis, because Jaron Ennis just became the IBF. Not just, but his last 2 fights are with the IBF. That is not a title that Terrence Crawford held. All right. So basically, they're not the same situation. Okay. Moving on to the next thing. Boots was rated with the WBO. Now, to defend Boots here, the WBO, he was rated high in, right? He was rated right behind Virgil Ortiz Jr. Okay, basically. Now, a lot of people like to say, to defend Crawford, that Crawford, why would you leave the WBO and go the IBF route if you're highly ranked in the WBO and you're close to getting a fight with Crawford? All right. In Jaron Ennis' defense, Jaron Ennis decided to remove himself from the WBO rankings and go to the IBF because the WBO let Crawford fight someone that was rated below him on the rankings, which was David Avenesian. Okay, so if you look at the WBO rankings, you would see Jaron Ennis is right below Virgil Ortiz Jr. Virgil Ortiz left the WBO because he ducked Crawford twice, right? According to the president of the WBO, that's official. He ducked Crawford twice. He refused to take the fight twice, even though he was right there, #1 guy in the WBO. He refused Crawford twice, and then he went on to the fight Stan Jonas for the WBA title, which he pulled out of the fight twice because of health reasons, and now he's fighting at 154. All right? So Boots, and he said this in the interview, it's not true that he left the WBO to avoid Crawford. He left the WBO because the WBO sanctioned a fight with David Avenesian when David Avenesian was lower on the list with the WBO. So I'm not throwing that in Boots' face. But what I will say when it comes to Boots and Crawford, Boots' father and also Steven Espinoza, who was the president of Showtime Boxing or whatever, they weren't agreeing as far as what was said in interviews, because according to Bozy Ennis, his father, they were trying to stay loyal to Showtime. So when Black Prime reached out to Boots Ennis, okay, to try to make a fight between Boots Ennis and Terrence Crawford, Jaron Ennis' dad said in the interview that they wanted to be loyal to Showtime. They weren't going to make a move to fight on Black Prime, BLK Prime, without Showtime giving them the okay to do it. You know what I'm saying? So yes, there was an offer made. Crawford had said there was an offer made to fight Jaron Ennis, and Jaron Ennis, his team overall, didn't agree with it. And Steven Espinoza is on record saying, like, right now, the direction is to fight Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. You know what I'm saying? And he said that, yes, they were in talks with BLK Prime, but he said that there was nothing that they had to offer in order to make that fight at that time. So it's not that Boots didn't want the fight. It's more like not everybody was in line with what they wanted to do with Crawford and Boots. It seemed like Crawford was chasing Spence, which makes a lot more sense. Why would you take the Boots fight over the Errol Spence fight when the Errol Spence fight is one of the biggest fights in all of boxing, and they did well with pay-per-views? So this doesn't make sense to make the Boots fight at the time that they were trying to make it. All right, they offered it when they offered David Avenesian, but again, they didn't want to go to Black Prime without Showtime approving that fight, which never happened. So according to Boots, he's saying that he wanted to take the fight with Terrence Crawford, right? He wanted to take the fight, but he said he never got a call back. Maybe the reason why you never got a call back is because the rest of your team over there with Showtime, maybe your dad, they weren't on board with making that fight. All right, so it's similar to David Benavidez right now and his dad, and not everybody being on board. If you're not getting a call back and you agree, you're verbally agreeing to take the $5 million, take the lower amount, but there are moves being made behind the scenes that doesn't really involve you. What else are you going to do? You're being left in the dark about it. You might want the fight, but maybe the people that are managing your career maybe don't want the fight. You know what I mean? It's like when King Kong Luis Ortiz said he would have definitely taken the AJ fight when the offer was sent, but someone on his team refused to fight with AJ. It's like we hear that all the time. You say in an interview you want the fight, but your team are saying a different thing. You know what I mean? So it's just Crawford is not at fault there because an offer was actually made to you, right? Right. Moving on. David Benavidez, comparing him to Jerome Boots Ennis, you really can't. All right. Boots is well on his way. He did beat a former champion and what's this guy name from 140? The Russian fighter. I can't think of his name right now. It'll come back to me. All right, but he did beat a former champion at one point. He is high on the ratings and rankings and stuff. He is a the IBF mandatory. So I'm not trying to take anything away from Boots because I know he wants to fight the best. I know he wanted the Virgil Ortiz fight. I know he wanted the Spence fight. I know he wanted the Sergey Olympian. So I was thinking he did fight a former champion from 140. So I'm not trying to take anything away from his resume, but you got David Benavidez, who is already a two-time champion at 168. He's already a two-time champion. He's never lost a title. He's lost a title on the scales. He lost a title to recreational drugs, but he's never lost in the ring. All right. Not only that, but David Benavidez has fought and beat 3 champions. He fought and beat a two-time 168 champion and Anthony Durrell. He went and beat Caleb Plant, who was a former champion, only losing to Canelo Alvarez, who had recently knocked out Anthony Durrell, right? And he also beat a 2-division champion, undefeated fighter, in Demetrius Andre. So there's levels, all right? He's beating guys that were still good when he fought them. They were still good when he fought them. And he gets a lot of credit for doing that. It's like there's levels when it comes to the resume. David Benavidez is clearly the best fighter at 168 that's currently not a champion. Right now, resume-wise, yes, he's been there. I would love to see Benavidez fight Dave Morrell. I would love to see Crawford fight Boots. I would love to see these fights. But David Benavidez is right there to fight Canelo Alvarez. In fact, if the WBC actually ordered the fight, we would get the fight. We would just get it. They would find a way to make it happen. But since the WBC is allowing Canelo to do whatever he want, and this guy has been the interim champ. And again, interim champ with the WBC for 2 years now. Different from Boots Ennis' situation. All right? This guy has been the interim champ for 2 years, beating former champions. Okay? In the process. It's not the same as Jerron Boots Ennis. Crawford won the title and was stripped right away because the IBF was due for a mandatory for a long time while Spence had a title. He won the title against Kell Brook how many years ago? 2017, and didn't have any mandatory defenses all that time. And I get it. Like a lot of those mandatories that would have been mandatories, those guys that was highly ranked in the IBF at the time, those are not fights that I wanted to see. I don't think those are fights that most of us wanted to see. Most of us wanted to see, if not Crawford, the fights that we got from him, like Sean Porter, like Ugas, like Danny Garcia. Those were valid fights. The mandatories or the rankings in the IBF, if you look on the IBF, there were a lot of fighters there that none of us really cared for. So we didn't get any mandatory. We haven't had a mandatory with the IBF that people wanted to see since Boots. And Boots just got there because he just switched in 2023 from the WBO to the IBF, the same year that Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford actually fought each other. So scenarios are completely different because David already was the interim champion for 2 years now. And he's also a former champion. It's levels. All right. Another thing is right now, Crawford is a free agent. The rematch clause. All right. He's been on the bench waiting for Errol Spence and the PBC to get everything together so he can honor this rematch clause that Spence activated. Spence activated the rematch clause, which made it where Crawford wasn't allowed to step outside and fight someone else until Errol Spence got the opportunity to fight for those titles again. So he had to sit on the bench, wherein we're almost going into March. The fight was back last July. So Crawford has been on a bench waiting for Errol, just for Errol to recently state he's not going on with the rematch with Terrence Crawford. So he activated it just to not take the fight. In the meantime, there are other fights that Crawford wanted. Another difference between the two is that, wait, I don't want to lose track. As far as being a free agent, he's no longer with the PBC. All right, and Jerron Ennis, not exactly sure what his situation is right now. You know, because I know he was signed with Showtime. I don't know what's happening with him in Amazon Prime, but I don't know what's happening. I know he's having issues with his promotional company. So with all that being said, who's putting up the money for this fight? Because right now, Terrence Crawford is available. All right, but the circumstances are different. You know, it's not similar to David Benavidez and Canelo Alvarez because Canelo Alvarez signed a 3-fight deal with the PBC. And where does David Benavidez fight? With the PBC. Even though Showtime is over, he's still with the PBC. He's still with Al Heyman. And Canelo signed for a 3-fight deal, already completing one of them against a junior welterweight, a super welterweight in Jamel Charlo, not David Benavidez. A fight has already been made, and it wasn't against David Benavidez, the WBC interim champion. Circumstances, again, more proof that the circumstances are different. I know you guys want to compare the two because you want the heat off Canelo, but the circumstances are completely different. They're not even close to being the same. All right. In order for things to be a little bit more similar, you know what would need to happen? Boots would have needed to be the interim champion, or he would have needed to be Crawford's mandatory, right? And instead of Crawford fighting Boots, Crawford goes on and take other fights, all right, from guys that's moving up, like Triple G and Jamel Charlo. It would need to be like Boots is your mandatory, but instead of fighting Boots, Devin Haney, who was undisputed, just like Jamel Charlo was, Devin Haney moves up 2 divisions to fight Crawford while Boots is sitting there waiting for his shot against Crawford. That would be a similar situation. That would be a similar situation. On top of multiple fights happening before even the Devin Haney fight, while Boots is sitting around waiting for his shot. That would need the circumstances are completely different. So I say I want Boots' fight. But I also understand that Crawford is coming off his career best win. He did well with the numbers. He is looking to make more money. Crawford's plan prior to fighting Errol Spence was to move up and fight Jamel Charlo for undisputed. Crawford's plan was always to become undisputed in another division, which is 154. That was always the plan. It was never to stick around at 147. It was never to stick around there. Canelo is campaigning at 168. Now, he's taken 2 fights above 168, but he campaigns at 168. He fought Kovalev, went back down to 168. He fought Bivol, lost, and went back down to 168. And fought 2 guys that moved up to fight him in Triple G and Jamel Charlo. Crawford has said, I want Jamel Charlo next. What happened with Jamel Charlo? Jamel Charlo lost to Canelo. And it didn't look good in the fight. Didn't really try to win. So now he wants a Tim Tszyu because Tim Tszyu is at least, if he goes to Australian fighter, at least they can make that a big fight. That's if he goes out there or if they have it in Vegas. But Tim Tszyu has a lot of momentum. You know, right now he's a guy at 154. He has, his buzz is bigger than Jamel Charlo's right now because he's been active. Jamel was not active. He had injuries. He was supposed to fight Tim Tszyu. He didn't fight Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu went on and started stopping all these other guys at 154 and beating them up. And Jamel, I don't know what Jamel is doing right now. All I know is that he lost to Canelo every round. And he had some personal issues going on outside of the sport. So can you get mad at Crawford for wanting to move up when he said that's what he was going to do anyway? Are you mad at Crawford for wanting to fight Canelo when everybody wants to fight Canelo? Everybody wants to fight Canelo. So he's looking to cash out because he's on his way out. Are you mad at him for wanting to do that? Were you mad at Spence when he didn't fight Boots? I'm not, because I know that Spence was trying to fight Crawford as well. So stop just throwing random shit out to take the heat off Canelo. Because the circumstances are completely different. You know, completely different. So I probably could say more, but just going on and on and on with this Crawford and Boots thing, like, I want to see the fight, but to compare it to Canelo and Benavidez is completely, it's insane. It's not realistic. And I know why you guys are coming here to say it. I understand. But there are 2 complete, I mean, the scenarios couldn't be any more different. The only similarities in these scenarios is that both Canelo and Crawford are undisputed or were undisputed. That's the only similarity here. But Boots is not David Benavidez. He is not in a position of David Benavidez. You know, Boots is trying to get to that position. He's trying to fight the former champs. If he had fought a Keith Thurman and beat him, I would say, okay, I feel you. If he had fought an Errol Spence and beat him, I would have been like, all right, I get it. Because now he's beating those guys. He has not got there yet. And it's partly due to the fact that no one really wants to fight him. But no one over there, when he was with Showtime, was really going and going far and deep and making that fight happen. His buzz is actually based more off Terrence Crawford more than anything. So let's dead this. I'm sure I'm still going to get more comments on this, but I try to bring up as many points and as many factors and being fair while doing it. Because I get Boots has been, people are telling you Boots avoided Crawford by leaving the WBO by going to get an email title at IBF. No, what Boots said in his interview makes a lot of sense. And it actually lines up perfectly because if you look at the timeline, he did leave the WBO after the Avanesian fight or during the Avanesian fight when that fight was announced. He did leave the WBO. So you shouldn't use that against him. And when it comes to the Black Prime offer, again, he probably wanted it, but did his dad want it? Did Steven ask? Did Showtime want it? Bigger than his dad. Did Showtime want it? Did Showtime want that to happen? Were they willing to let him go to Black Prime to fight Terrence Crawford? Probably not, because they're normally not letting their fighters go elsewhere to take fights. You know, especially if you're a potential star, you know, then that's not going to do it. All right, so please stop with the comparisons, man. I don't think Tank situation is the same neither. I want Tank to fight more people. All right, I want Tank to fight more people. He's not, but he's not holding the belts hostage. He never did. He just became elevated as a WBA super champion. All this time, he's been fighting and holding on to the WBA regular champion, fight who he wants to pick. Yes, he's cherry picking, but again, he's not holding no belts hostage. Canelo is. And why you guys bring up Floyd Mayweather all the time, I don't understand. Floyd Mayweather at 36 years old fought Canelo Alvarez. At 36 years old, he fought Canelo Alvarez and nearly shut him out. At 36-year-old, he did that. And then went on to fight Manny Pacquiao a couple years after that. What are we talking about? So if Floyd can fight Canelo at 36 years old, Canelo should be at least fighting Benavidez right now. But again, what's going on with the PBC? I think the PBC is the reason why we're not getting that fight. Because even though Canelo doesn't really want that fight, and many believe he's ducking Benavidez, what did PBC do to make it work? Because they needed to make it work. And if you're going to pull Canelo to fight over there, why pull him to fight over there and not let him fight the best matchup over there? Why go over there and let him fight the Charlos? Doesn't make sense. All right, so listen, I'm going to get on out of here, man. It's super late. I don't know the video was long, but it's just like, come on, man. Like, it's common sense at this point. Like, people just saying whatever. Y'all have a good night. Peace.